He was literally immersed in nature. No other artist in the Renaissance really showed that much interest in the natural world and the surrounding world.
For centuries, Leonardo da Vinci has been celebrated as one of the greatest minds in human history. His name is linked with genius in art, science, engineering, and invention. But until recently, we only had his notebooks, his paintings, and historical records to understand him. Now, with the help of modern science, something extraordinary has happened. Researchers claim to have sequenced Leonardo da Vinci's DNA. This discovery opens a new chapter in the story of this Renaissance master. But to understand why this is so groundbreaking, we need to look at his life, his family, and the mysteries that surrounded him. Leonardo was born in 1452 in a small town called Vinci in Italy. His parents were not married, which in that era made him illegitimate, and because of that, his path in life was unusual. He did not go to a formal university, yet his mind was always curious. He studied nature, animals, human anatomy, the stars, and the flow of water. He filled thousands of pages with sketches and ideas, many of which were far ahead of his time. But behind this brilliance, many people always wondered what made Leonardo different. Was he just a product of hard work and imagination? Or was there something inside him, something written in his very DNA, that gave him abilities so rare they seemed almost impossible? To answer this, scientists needed to do something that had never been done before: trace Leonardo's living family and compare their DNA with what could be found from preserved remains. The first step was genealogy. Leonardo himself had no children, so at first glance it seemed impossible to find his bloodline. But through careful research of archives, birth certificates, and family documents, historians managed to trace his relatives across 21 generations. This search took decades, but it finally revealed something amazing. At least 14 men alive today carry the same Y chromosome that Leonardo carried more than 500 years ago. The Y chromosome is passed almost unchanged from father to son, generation after generation, which means that by studying these men, scientists could reconstruct the genetic code of Leonardo himself. With this discovery, researchers were able to identify unique traits hidden in his DNA traits that might explain his extraordinary talents. Among the findings were markers linked to sharper eyesight, heightened creativity, resistance to some diseases, and even neurological conditions that made him experience the world differently from most people. These results made scholars rethink how Leonardo's genius worked. For example, one of the most fascinating discoveries was the possibility that Leonardo had a condition called synesthesia. This is when senses are connected in unusual ways, like hearing music but seeing it as colors, or reading words and tasting flavors. People with synesthesia often describe the world as richer, more connected, and more intense. If Leonardo had this, it could explain why his paintings seemed to glow with life, and why his imagination flowed so easily between art, science, and invention. To him, knowledge was not separated into boxes. It was all one continuous, colorful experience. But the DNA also suggested something else. Leonardo's brain may have processed memory and detail differently from other people. Studies show he may have carried genetic markers linked to enhanced working memory, which would allow him to hold complex ideas in his mind and switch between them without confusion. Think of it as being able to juggle many mental balls at once without dropping any. This ability could explain why Leonardo could design machines, study anatomy, paint masterpieces, almost at the same time, moving from one project to another without losing track of his thoughts. Modern psychologists often say Leonardo showed signs of ADHD, always curious, restless, and moving between subjects. But combined with his genetic gifts, this restlessness became an engine of discovery. Instead of being a weakness, it turned into unstoppable creativity. His DNA even suggested resistance to certain diseases and a generally strong body, which helped him live to the age of 67, a very long life for the 15th and 16th centuries. When many people died much younger, another surprising discovery involved Leonardo's eyesight. The genetic data indicated markers linked to unusually sharp vision and possible stereopsis, which is the ability to see depth and distance more accurately than most people. If true, this would explain his unmatched skill in drawing realistic three-dimensional objects and capturing light and shadows so naturally. Art historians have always said Leonardo's paintings looked alive, as if the subjects could breathe. His understanding of perspective and anatomy was almost superhuman. Now science suggests that part of this came from his own biology. His eyes were not ordinary. They gave him an edge that, when combined with his training and observation, allowed him to capture reality with precision no other artist of his time could match. Yet, with every new answer, new mysteries appeared. Some of the genetic findings hinted at traits rarely found together in one person. It was as if nature had combined several rare gifts in Leonardo alone. The chances of this happening are extremely small, which is why people say there will never be another Leonardo da Vinci. And while DNA tells us part of the story, it cannot explain everything. Leonardo's genius was also shaped by his environment, his endless curiosity, and his willingness to explore forbidden knowledge. For example, he dissected human bodies to understand anatomy, a practice frowned upon, even dangerous in his time. He studied fossils and questioned the Church's view of the natural world. He sketched machines of war, flying devices, and robots that seemed centuries ahead of their time. His DNA may have given him the tools, but his courage and curiosity turned those tools into discoveries. When news of Leonardo's DNA research came out, some people were thrilled, while others were skeptical. Could we really learn so much about a man who lived 500 years ago? The researchers defended their work, explaining how the combination of genealogy, modern sequencing, and preserved biological materials made the findings possible. They also admitted that some areas are still uncertain, but even the confirmed parts already change how we see Leonardo. He was not just lucky or just hard-working. He was born with a genetic makeup that gave him advantages very few humans ever have. Imagine combining the eyesight of an eagle, the memory of a scholar, the creativity of a poet, and the curiosity of a child, all in one person. That was Leonardo da Vinci. His DNA shows us that while genius is rare, it can sometimes be explained by the mysterious language of our genes. The deeper scientists looked into Leonardo da Vinci's DNA, the more fascinating the story became. It was not just about biology or genetics. It was about how these invisible codes inside his body connected with his life, his art, and his inventions. To many, Leonardo always seemed superhuman, as if his mind lived in the future while his body remained in the Renaissance. But when researchers began mapping his genetic traits, they started to see patterns that could explain this feeling. One of the most important findings was linked to his ability to see connections between things that others could not. In his notebooks, Leonardo would often switch from drawing a bird's wing to sketching the mechanics of a flying machine, or from studying the flow of water to designing canals. At first, this looks like randomness, but in reality, it may have been the way his brain was wired. Some genes in his DNA are associated with what scientists call hyperconnectivity, meaning that different parts of the brain communicate more strongly than usual. This could mean that Leonardo's brain was constantly linking ideas, images, and knowledge across fields, creating sparks of innovation where others saw nothing. If you think about how most people learn, they often keep subjects separate. A student might study math in one class, art in another, and science in a third, never mixing them. But for Leonardo, there were no walls between subjects. To him, math was in the patterns of nature. Art was in the proportions of the human body, and engineering was simply the science of making imagination real. His DNA may have supported this unusual style of thinking. The condition of synesthesia, which his genetic markers suggested, fits perfectly here. Imagine looking at the stars at night, and not only seeing points of light, but also hearing them as notes of music in your mind. Imagine reading numbers and instantly feeling them as shapes. For Leonardo, this blending of senses and ideas could have been natural, and it gave him a creative edge. That is why his sketches of anatomy were not only scientific studies, but also works of art, and why his paintings contained the precision of an engineer. Everything connected. Another remarkable area revealed by the DNA study was Leonardo's health and physical endurance. Historical records show he worked late into the night, sometimes going without food or rest, driven by ideas that would not let him sleep. Scientists believe his genes may have included variants that gave him strong resilience, both physically and mentally. There were markers linked to a slower aging process, as well as resistance to infections common in his time. This would have been crucial in the 15th and 16th centuries, when outbreaks of disease were frequent and many people died young. The fact that Leonardo lived to 67, older than most men of his time, supports the idea that his body was genetically tougher than average. Strong health gave him the time he needed to fill thousands of pages with ideas, each one a step toward understanding the world. His eyesight was also a key factor. Imagine having vision so sharp that you could notice details invisible to others. Leonardo's DNA suggested he had markers connected with superior stereoscopic vision, meaning he could judge depth and distance more precisely. This gift allowed him to study perspective better than anyone before him. His paintings like The Last Supper and Mona Lisa are celebrated not only for their beauty, but also for their scientific accuracy in perspective and light. Even his sketches of simple objects, like gears or water flow, look alive, as if they are moving on the page. This clarity of vision could also explain why he was fascinated with shadows, reflections, and light beams, recording their behavior with obsessive detail. To Leonardo, seeing was not passive. It was an active science, and his DNA gave him a rare lens through which to view the universe. But perhaps the most mysterious discovery in Leonardo's genetic code was connected to his brain's memory system. Modern research shows he may have carried genetic markers associated with enhanced working memory, a trait that allows someone to keep multiple ideas in their mind and manipulate them at the same time. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle with 20 pieces in your head without writing anything down. Most people could not do it, but Leonardo may have been able to. This kind of memory is a foundation of creativity because it allows for mental experimentation. Leonardo could imagine a machine, turn it around in his mind, break it apart, and rebuild it better, all before touching a single tool. His notebooks prove this ability. Countless sketches of flying machines, war devices, and engineering tools that look like blueprints for modern technology. His imagination was not just artistic, it was scientific, systematic, and far ahead of its time. Still, Leonardo's DNA story is not only about gifts. Some scientists suggest that certain genetic traits may have also brought him struggles. For instance, the same hyperactivity and restless mind that gave him endless curiosity might have made it hard for him to finish projects. We know from history that Leonardo left many paintings incomplete, including works he promised to patrons. He would start something, then move to another idea, then another, always chasing the next discovery. Some believe this was due to what we would now call ADHD, and the genetic findings support this theory. But again, what seems like a weakness was part of his genius. His restless energy pushed him into so many fields that he became a universal thinker, not limited to just one area. In a strange way, his flaws were also his strengths. There are also whispers of darker secrets in his genetic history. Some researchers believe that Leonardo's DNA shows signs of traits rarely seen in one person. It's almost as if he was a unique combination nature produced only once. This has led to speculation and even myths. In Italy, stories spread that the church kept secret files on Leonardo, fearing his knowledge in experiments. He dissected human corpses, studied blood, and even wrote about the soul, topics forbidden in his time. Could his rare DNA have influenced his obsession with life, death, and what lies beyond? Some even wonder if he experienced moments of altered perception, where his brain worked in ways normal people could not imagine. We may never know the full truth, but the DNA results bring these questions back to life. As word of these discoveries spread, scholars began debating what it all meant. Was Leonardo's genius something that could ever be repeated? Could his DNA be used in the future to inspire new generations of thinkers? Some dream of using genetic research to encourage creativity, memory, or vision in people today, imagining a world where more minds could think like Leonardo. But others warn against this idea, saying that genius is not only about DNA, it is also about environment, culture, opportunity, and personal drive. After all, many people might have rare genes. But without Leonardo's endless curiosity and fearless exploration, those gifts would remain unused. This debate reminds us that DNA is a map, but not the whole journey. Leonardo's genius was shaped by both nature and nurture, by his genetic code and his unstoppable will to explore. When the news of Leonardo da Vinci's DNA study was first shared with the world, it felt like history had suddenly come alive. For centuries, Leonardo existed only through his paintings, his notebooks, and the stories of those who met him. But now, thanks to modern science, we are beginning to glimpse him on an entirely new level, not just as a man of ideas, but as a human being with a unique biological blueprint. This discovery raises questions that go far beyond Leonardo himself. What does it mean for us to understand genius through DNA? Can creativity, imagination, and vision really be explained by science? Or does the mystery of Leonardo remind us that some parts of human brilliance will always remain beyond numbers, charts, and genetic codes? These questions continue to spark debate, not just among scientists and historians, but among ordinary people who wonder how much of who we are is written in our blood, and how much comes from the choices we make in the world around us. The final report on Leonardo's DNA suggested that his genetic code contained combinations of traits that are extremely rare to find together. A person with enhanced vision might not usually have extraordinary memory. Someone with hyperconnectivity of the brain might not also have strong physical endurance. But Leonardo seemed to be the exception, a 1 in a billion mix. This makes him not only rare, but almost impossible to repeat. Some have even described him as a natural experiment. A man born with the perfect storm of traits that allowed him to see the world in ways nobody else could. For example, one theory suggests that Leonardo's heightened senses and creative brain worked together to make him almost like a living camera, observing the smallest details, storing them in memory, and then translating them into art or engineering designs with unmatched accuracy. In today's world, where we rely on computers and artificial intelligence to process massive amounts of information, it is astonishing to realize that one man in the 15th century carried a brain capable of doing something very similar, powered by his own biology. But DNA is not destiny, and that is where the story becomes even more powerful. Even if Leonardo had all of these rare genetic traits, they would have meant little if he had not used them. Many people today carry unusual genes, but they live ordinary lives. Leonardo, however, chose a life of exploration. From his earliest years, he showed a curiosity that could not be contained. He drew rivers and plants when other children were playing. He watched birds and tried to understand how they flew. He asked questions that no one else thought to ask. His DNA may have given him tools, but it was his mind, his heart, and his courage that turned those tools into discoveries. In this sense, Leonardo's story teaches us an important lesson. Genius is never just nature or nurture. It is always both. Without his genes, he might not have had the same talents. Without his relentless curiosity, those talents might never have been expressed. The magic happened because both forces came together in one extraordinary person. The discovery of Leonardo's DNA also connects us to his family story in a surprising way. For centuries, his family line was thought to have ended, since he had no children of his own. Yet the study of genealogy revealed that 14 men alive today still carry his Y chromosome. The same genetic code passed down from father to son for more than 500 years. This means that, in a sense, Leonardo is still with us. It's not just in his art and ideas, but in living DNA carried by his distant relatives. It is humbling to think about. A man who seemed larger than life is still part of the human family, linked through blood to people who walk among us today. Perhaps this is why the study of his DNA feels so emotional. It makes Leonardo less of a distant legend and more of a human being, someone whose bloodline continues even now. Of course, not everyone agrees on how far we should go with these findings. Some scholars worry that reducing Leonardo to his DNA risks oversimplifying him. Genius, they argue, cannot be measured in genes alone. What about the culture of Renaissance Italy, where art and science were encouraged like never before? What about the teachers, patrons, and experiences that shaped Leonardo's growth? Can DNA explain the beauty of the Mona Lisa's smile or the boldness of dissecting bodies in a time when such work was forbidden? The answer is no. DNA may reveal the foundation, but the building of Leonardo's life was made of choices. struggles, and inspirations that go beyond science. This caution is important because it reminds us not to worship genetics as the only truth, but to see it as one piece of a larger puzzle. Yet, even with this caution, the discovery excites the imagination. If Leonardo's DNA could reveal secrets about his vision, his memory, and creativity, could it also inspire advances in modern medicine or education? Some researchers believe that studying how his brain processed information could help us design better learning methods for children, especially those with ADHD or other conditions once seen as weaknesses but which might, under the right conditions, fuel creativity. Others suggest that understanding his genetic resilience could inform new treatments for diseases, or even help us understand how to slow down aging. In this way, Leonardo's gift to humanity continues, not only through his art and inventions, but through his very biology, which may still teach us lessons today. And then there are the mysteries, the unanswered questions that keep the legend of Leonardo alive. Some parts of his DNA study hint at unusual traits that science cannot fully explain yet. Could Leonardo's brain have worked in ways we still do not understand? Could his perception of the world have been closer to what we might call expanded consciousness? His notebooks often describe visions, dreams, and thoughts that feel almost supernatural in their depth. Was this simply the product of a restless genius? Or was there something in his biology that allowed him to reach states of awareness most people never experience? These questions may never have final answers, but they remind us that even in the age of science, Leonardo remains a mystery. In the end, the story of Leonardo da Vinci's DNA is not just about science or history. It is about inspiration. It shows us that the line between the possible and the impossible is thinner than we think. 500 years ago, a boy born out of wedlock in a small Italian village grew up to become the greatest genius of all time. His DNA carried rare gifts, but his spirit carried something even greater: the drive to ask questions, to imagine, to create, and to see the world not as it was, but as it could be. That is why Leonardo still matters today. Not because we can now decode his genes, but because his life proves that curiosity, courage, and imagination can change the world. Whether we study his art, his inventions, or his DNA, the message is the same. Human potential is vast, and sometimes it takes one extraordinary life to remind us of it. So, as scientists continue to study Leonardo's DNA, one truth remains: we will never fully capture his genius. The secret of Leonardo da Vinci is not only in his chromosomes, but in the timeless power of a human mind that refused to stop wondering. His DNA may tell us how he was built, but his legacy tells us who he was: a man who reached across centuries to inspire every one of us to dream bigger, think deeper, and never stop asking, what if? And perhaps that is the real code of Leonardo da Vinci, not a genetic code, but a code of imagination, one that can live in all of us if we choose to unlock it. Leonardo da Vinci has always stood apart from the rest of humanity, almost as if he was born from a different world. When we hear his name, we immediately think of the Mona Lisa's smile, the detailed drawings of flying machines, the studies of the human body, and the endless notebooks filled with questions, sketches, and ideas. For more than 500 years, Leonardo has been a symbol of what human beings can achieve when imagination and knowledge come together. He was a painter, an engineer, a scientist, an architect, a philosopher, and even a dreamer of technology that would not exist until centuries later. But as much as we admire his works, one question has always remained: how could a single man hold so much knowledge, talent, and vision in one lifetime? Historians, artists, and scientists have spent centuries trying to answer that question. Some argued that Leonardo's genius was the result of endless curiosity and constant observation. Others believed that his environment, living during the Renaissance, a time of great cultural rebirth in Italy, gave him the perfect setting to explore new ideas. But even with these explanations, many felt there was still something unusual about him, something that could not be explained by history alone. Was it possible that the secret of Leonardo da Vinci's genius was written not in his notebooks, but in his very DNA? In recent years, with the advancement of genetic science, researchers have turned their attention to this possibility. The idea of unlocking the DNA of a man who died in 1519 may sound impossible. But modern technology, combined with centuries of genealogical research, has made it reality. By tracing Leonardo's family tree, scientists discovered living relatives who carry parts of his genetic code. Through this work, they have been able to reconstruct pieces of Leonardo's DNA, opening a window into his biology that was never available before. What they found is not only fascinating, but also deeply mysterious. The DNA results suggest that Leonardo may have carried rare traits, sharper vision than most people, an unusually powerful memory, and even neurological conditions that made him experience the world differently. These traits did not exist in isolation. They combined in a way that made him unique, almost as if nature itself had chosen him to show what the human mind could achieve at its very peak. And while these discoveries excite scientists, they also raise new questions about the very nature of genius. Can creativity and imagination be traced back to our genes? Or is there always something more, something beyond science that drives a person to greatness? In this story, we will explore what the DNA of Leonardo da Vinci reveals about his life, his gifts, and his mysteries. We will look at how science is bringing us closer to understanding one of the most brilliant men in history, and how even today Leonardo continues to inspire us not only with his art and inventions, but also with the secrets written in his very blood.